Hi everyone. It's great to see so many people here today. I think we're going to give it a few more minutes. But yeah, if you would like to join us and let us know where you're from, this webinar is about inclusive recruitment. So if you want to use the webinar chat function, we'd be really keen to hear about what your number one challenge is regarding inclusive recruitment. So please feel free to use that chat function. Let us know where you're from, what your challenges are, what you need to know, and then hopefully that's something that Jay and I can support you with throughout this webinar today. I've got a question here about the chat function is disabled. Okay, we'll sort that out for you. Thanks, Amy. So I think we will kick off. So thank you very much for joining us here today. We're delighted to launch the first in a new NeuroBox series of practical webinars, exploring the opportunities and the challenges of creating neuro-inclusive workplaces. My name is Dr. Deborah Leveroy. I'm the Head of Research and Consultancy at NeuroBox here. So my background is in workplace disability management, academic research and teaching in dyslexia and creative practice. For those of you who are new to NeuroBox today, we're a workplace adjustment provider, so we support individuals, teams and organisations and help them to create inclusive workplaces. In today's webinar, I'm joined by Jay Harris, Head of HR at the Orpheus Centre, who will be discussing how to establish an inclusive recruitment process. Before we introduce Jay, just to give you a little bit of housekeeping before we start for the audience, please, as I said, please feel free to use the Q&A chat function, and we'll go through questions in the last 10 minutes or so. As we're in a Zoom webinar, you should be automatically muted, but if you can just double check, that would be great. Lastly, you'll notice that the session is recorded. So after the session, you will receive this recording to watch back. You'll also get the slides and also some key takeaways and top tips by email. But I'd like to introduce Jay. Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No worries at all. So I know you've got a really exciting presentation to share with us today. Before you go into that, would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself and Orpheus?
Yeah, no worries. So I as you said, I'm the head of HR at the Orpheus Centre, and I've been there for nearly 7 years now. And before that, my HR experience is mainly sort of health and social care, having worked in some larger organisations in that sector before moving into smaller, medium organisations. And a main focus for my role as the head of HR at Orpheus is to foster an inclusive and supportive environment for everyone. I'm really passionate about disability awareness and dedicated to supporting Orpheus to become a role model for others in demonstrating how to be a great employer and colleague for disabled people. The Orpheus Centre is a specialist independent college and a charity for young disabled adults based in Godstone in Surrey. The college works to support students who are all passionate about the arts to achieve their potential and work towards a more independent life. And a big focus for us is for our students who all have disabilities to gain employment and find their rightful place in society.
Thanks, Jay. That's great. And I think we've got a PowerPoint coming up for you.
Thank you. Lovely. So as I said, we're a specialist college for young disabled adults, and we're really proud of the work that we have done. We've spent a long time working really hard on our inclusive recruitment process. We're really proud of it. We work hard on recruiting, retaining and developing disabled people, and I hope to be able to give some guidance on how to create an inclusive recruitment process today. So the next slide, lovely, thank you. So this is our vision and mission as presented on our website, and our core beliefs are that disabled people should have the same opportunities as their non-disabled peers. And we aim to equip young disabled people with the skills and confidence that they need in order to live fulfilling lives. And we've gone on a real journey of discovery at the Orpheus Centre by looking realistically at ourselves as an employer, recognising where improvements need to be made, and we've been really determined to make positive change. So the main reason we started on our journey to recruit more disabled people was because our employers are working so hard to support our students to get jobs, and we have really high expectations on other employers to employ our students. We know how amazing they are, we know the value they can bring to our workplace, and we fiercely know the importance of employment for them. However, when we looked at ourselves as an employer, we actually were not very good at employing disabled people ourselves. So in 2019, only 4% of our workforce had declared that they had a disability. So we knew that we had to make some changes, and it was crucial that we position ourselves as a credible example for employing disabled people. And I'm showing you these figures. I think it's important to show you these because it has been a real journey for us. It's not a quick fix. I think it takes time. We've made mistakes. We've spent a really long time learning and developing our process to a point where this is now really embedded within our culture. And as a HR team, as a management team, as colleagues for disabled people. And what we wanted to see over those years is that improvement, those figures going up. And the more experienced you become, the better these figures will be. We're now at 33% in 2024 of employees who have a disability or a long-term health condition, which we're really, really proud of. But we were also really proud of going from 4 to 7%. So we're really proud of all the progress that we've made. And I wanted to show that this is a journey for us. It has been for us, and I think it would be for other people. So next slide, please, Jim. So I'm sure people watching are very familiar with recruitment. So I want to talk about how you can make sure your process doesn't have any barriers in it that will prevent or deter disabled people from applying for your jobs. So we'll have a look at advertising, we'll look at offering interviews of disabled applicants who meet the minimum criteria, shortlisting, and then on to interview. Thank you. So for us, inclusive recruitment starts right at the beginning, of that recruitment process. And I would say it's really important to do some work in making sure people know that you, as an organisation, have made a positive commitment to employing disabled people. We know really well that many disabled people have faced discrimination in their life because of their disability. And many people with hidden disabilities are fearful of disclosing their disability in case this has a negative impact on getting a job or even being selected for an interview. So on our website, we have a section about equality and diversity at Orpheus. We give information about our commitment to employing disabled people. We talk about the steps that we are taking about removing barriers and challenging attitudes and ensuring disabled people have opportunities to fulfil their potential, realise their aspirations at the Orpheus Centre. And this sits next to our roles that are available. So again, people can see that they can declare to us that they have a disability, and we will support them within our process. So we say on all of our ads that all disabled applicants who meet the minimum criteria for the role are set out in the role profile and person specification will be offered at interview. So in principle, I think probably seems a simple thing to do. However, what we quickly learned was putting this in our adverts isn't enough. This is a nice aspect, but it's not enough. And it threw up quite a lot of questions for us, such as how do we make this completely objective? Who is making the decisions on who meets the minimum criteria? How do we protect the right of privacy for our applicants? Because that's really important. How do we evidence that we've taken a fair approach to our recruitment? So it did throw up quite a few challenges for us. And I do appreciate as well, it gives more challenges to the bigger companies as well. We are small, we do have a fair few applications, but not hundreds. So I want to kind of give some advice on how to make that as easy as possible, but I do recognise that if you're working in a large organisation with hundreds of applicants who meet the minimum criteria, that this might still be challenging, but hopefully some of this might help. So for us, this starts with the hiring manager at the point that they're creating their job descriptions. So often when we create person specifications, the list of essentials is huge, and I see this quite a lot on adverts for other organisations. And actually for us, when I started here, we used to have just a standard template of essential criteria that we wanted from all of our new hires. I don't know how long it had been there, I think a long time. And I think that used to be quite normal practice, and I think it is in other organisations as well. So standard soft skills such as excellent communication, great team player. We actually had fun with a great sense of humour on all of our essentials as well. We don't anymore. So, and another one we had actually was a clean driving license, and the ability to drive on all of our person specs. And the reason for that is we're in a really remote area. So I can see why it was put on there. You know, you do need to be able to get to us to be able to work. But instantly thinking of disabled people, and actually if we look at our students as a group of disabled people, not one of them drive, so we've instantly excluded a huge group of people from even applying for our job in that one little bit. So it's really important to think of that essential criteria and look at what might put up a barrier for disabled applicants. And actually for driving, we know this doesn't have to be a barrier anymore, because we've got disabled employees who have an access to work grants, and that covers their transport to work, so it doesn't have to be a barrier. So start with your hiring manager, make sure that they're really clear on their person spec, and don't be afraid to challenge them. Ask them why they've put something on there. So great communication, for example, not every role needs to have a great communicator. So is it essential, and can you be more specific? Does it have to be all communication if it has to be communication? Or can you say that they can communicate via only written, such as email, or only verbal? Be really specific as to what it is that you need, and try to avoid those real blanket statements such as great communicator. You know, sometimes you might need to have those, and that's fine as long as it is essential. You know, we do have some roles that absolutely it's essential to drive because they drive our students around, but we now only put those things on roles that are absolutely essential. So once you have your essentials, it's really important to decide what your minimum criteria is going to be, and highlight exactly what you need for each job. So we all know that most people who apply for job roles don't meet every single essential, and especially when you have massive, great big lists. So be really clear as to what it is that you need for someone to be able to do that job. And we know exactly what these things are before we even go to advert. And then make it really easy for disabled people to apply. So offer them to do it in a different format. Because we have information within our adverts and on our ads about our commitment to employing disabled people, we often get phone calls asking for more information about that, and from people saying that they might need some support in how to apply. So we've completed forms over the phone, we've completed forms in person, we've had people come in and we've helped them complete those application forms. We don't have to do it in the format that it's advertised at. We can do that differently, and we make that really clear to people. So start with your hiring manager. Are they clear with, you know, with their essentials? Know what your minimum criteria for each role is going to be. Don't be afraid to challenge your hiring managers. You know, really ask them if their essentials are essential, and really think about whether those essentials are creating a barrier for a disabled person. And then make it really easy for your disabled people to apply, and be open to being adaptable. So that's kind of your prep stage, and if you get that, I always feel if you get that bit right, I think the next bit makes it a lot easier for you. So I know from experience that in big organisations you could be sifting through hundreds and hundreds of applications for one role, so this might seem a bit daunting. So again, this is a good reason as to why it's important that you're really clear on what your minimum criteria for the role is. If you're dealing with large volumes of applicants, and you could have 2 stages to that minimum criteria, you could have a first stage and then you know, bring in some more of those essentials in from desirables. That might work. So it's always a big task anyway, isn't it, for a HR team to shortlist applicants, and this is not going to make it any easier. If I'm completely honest, it will make it a bit more time consuming. So I would really prepare for that. So make sure your team know exactly what it is they're doing, and make sure they know why, make sure they're on board, and make sure they're completely involved in being, you know, really good at employing disabled people. And make this your best practice, and make it part of your recruitment policy and process. So don't make it an add-on. Don't just add more work for people to do, or, you know, just add it to someone's current role. Like, change the whole process. If this is how your process is going to be, make this your best practice and add it into your process. And this is why this works for us, because it isn't an add-on or a nice to do or even a tick box exercise. This is our policy and our procedure. And we rewrote our policy with this in mind. And so it's part of everyone's jobs. Everyone knows what their role is within this. So I suppose one of the things of big organisations might have is more resource, to have more software to be able to work with the people who are making disclosures. We use an ATS. We can pull reports. We can filter for those applicants who have disclosed a disability. So for us, we start with these people first. We have a matrix that we create for each role, which has a list of our essential criteria, and usually that goes to the interview panel with the applications and the CVs. And they would complete that for each candidate. But for candidates who've applied and disclosed a disability, we as a HR team will manage those. We will check that they've met the minimum criteria, and we will then add them to a shortlist. And the reason for that is it keeps it really objective. It protects their right to privacy. Now, some of our disabled applicants are happy for people to know. Some of them aren't, and that's absolutely up to them. That's fine. That's no problem at all. So this way we can really protect their privacy if that's what they want. If you don't have that resource, I mean, we're a small organisation. We have good resource in our HR team, but we're small. But if you don't have that, you could assign that to someone else to do that. Maybe an administrator within another role. So be clear as to what your essential criteria is and try to remove things that may prove to be a barrier for disabled people. Don't be afraid to challenge, and assign resource to this process. Make this your best practice. It's really important. It's not an add-on. It's not something you just add into a current process. Make this your best practice. So interviewing is a really crucial part to assessing someone's capability to do the job. But so often the interview process itself can put a disabled person at a disadvantage. So it is crucial that we're able to remove disadvantages as much as possible. Quite often the disability isn't putting someone at a disadvantage, your process is. So I'd like to introduce you to David. David has worked at the Orpheus Centre he's a lovely chap on the picture there. He's worked at the Orpheus for 3.5 years now, and he's a really great voice for us for employing disabled people. He's really happy for us to talk to people about his recruitment, about the adjustments he has in place, and we've learnt a lot from David over the years. So David has Down syndrome, and he's actually an Orpheus alumni student. He left Orpheus as a student. After he left Orpheus as a student, he applied for one of our roles, which was for a kitchen assistant. Now, we knew David. He'd studied life skills with us. He'd excelled in the kitchen. We knew he had really great skills, and importantly to the role he was applying for, he was a great cook. So when we saw his application come through, we knew that he was a great candidate. He had declared his disability and he met the minimum criteria. So we shortlisted him and we invited him to interview. Then we as a team, so that's the HR team and the hiring managers, we discussed what we thought, what adjustments we could put in place for David. We asked him if he wanted to bring an advocate with him. He said he'd like to bring his mum, who is a fabulous advocate for David. We thought hard about our interview questions. We kept them easy, we kept them specific. We worked with our chef manager, who would be the hiring manager, who knew David, and she helped us to create the questions. We thought about where we were going to do the interview. We chose a really nice room that was informal. We thought about the layout. We sat us all around a table together, so he didn't feel too much like he was in front of a panel. We really discussed this as a team and thought it through. However, when David came to interview, this didn't work for him at all. It was a terrible interview because of what we'd put him through. He couldn't really answer the questions. It wasn't a good environment for him. So we kind of got through halfway through that interview, and we stopped it and we realised that this wasn't working. We asked David if he'd like to come to the kitchen with us and have a go at doing some of the jobs, which was great. So we chatted to him while he was chopping some veg and clearing some plates, and he told us beautifully what he could do in the kitchen. What I find really hard about that process is, had we not known David, we probably wouldn't have offered him the job that day, because he wasn't able to show us in the environment we had put him in how he could do that job really well. And luckily we did know David, but I couldn't help but think about him applying for jobs in other organisations who didn't know him and then not be getting the job that he's incredibly capable of doing. And he's done it. I mean, he's gone from strength to strength. He does cooking for us. He makes cakes for events. He's done. He's brilliant at his job. So here's where we went wrong. We decided for David what he needed, and we made the decision that he needed an advocate. We decided that we needed to simplify the questions, and we decided how we needed that room to look. And not one of those things worked for him. So they might work for other disabled people, but they didn't for David. So based on that experience, we changed our process. The next slide, please, Jen. So we no longer make assumptions. We call or chat via email, depending on what the person prefers, and we ask them what they need. We really take time to empower people to be in charge of what they need, and we make it clear that we want to make adjustments for them based on their individual needs. And we ask them, how can you show us the best way? How you can do this job and why you are the best candidate for this job? If we'd asked David that, or his mum, they probably would have said, interview's not going to work for him. Can we bring him in? We didn't ask, and that was our problem. So sometimes people are not sure of what it is they need, and I think it's really great to make suggestions, because actually we've got that experience now, and we do have experience of suggestions that might help, but we need to empower them to tell us what they need. And since then, we've made lots of different adjustments for people. For example, we had a candidate with a disability that affected processing of information. That person asked to have the interview questions beforehand, so they have time to think about their answers. And this removed that disadvantage that our process would have put them in if we had said no to that. Again, how we did things would have put them at a disadvantage, and that's not okay. For some of our roles, we have a written task to assess capability, and we've given dyslexic candidates a laptop with assistive tech to help them rather than making them write it. We've done interviews over Teams. We've assigned, we've got some great people in the Orpheus Centre who can support candidates when they come in at the interview stage, help them, talk them through the task, sit with them to go through that. So we have made lots and lots of adjustments, and we always ask people what adjustments it is they need. So don't make assumptions on what people need. Ask them, empower them to tell you what they need. Ask, how can you show us in the best possible way why you are the best person for this job? And then be really open to adjusting your interview process. And this is not a one shoe fits all. It really isn't. Like they really need to be led by the candidates and what is best for them. So I hope this helped a little bit. I hope it's given you a little bit of an insight into Orpheus and our inclusive recruitment. What's really important to us and what makes us, I think, good at this is that it's not a nice to have for us. It's not a tick box exercise. Being inclusive for disabled applicants and employees is embedded in everything that we do. Every change we make, every policy, every procedure, and everything we do is with our disabled people in mind to make sure that it works for them. This process has given us much bigger access to a much wider pool of candidates that we would have missed out on had we not been inclusive. And this is an ever-moving journey for us. We're always learning and we're always changing. It's okay to get it wrong. We have got it wrong. But what's important is that we kind of learn and grow because of those mistakes. And we're definitely a better organisation because of our commitment to employing disabled people and because of the incredible value they have brought to Orpheus. So just some key points to take from this today, from the PowerPoint is, shout out to people, let people know that you are inclusive for disabled candidates, remove barriers for disabled people from your person specification, be really clear what your minimum criteria is before recruitment, and don't be afraid to challenge. Ask those awkward questions, really question why people put things in their person spec. Be led by the candidate for what they need and empower them to direct you to their adjustment needs. And adjust your interview process. Don't be set in your ways. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. That was wonderful. I'm always struck when I hear you talk, because I get so much out of hearing you reflect on your process. It's very easy to kind of do a talk and say, we're great, we're doing all this stuff, look at us. But I really love the fact that, you've gone through that kind of process of having a go and not going how you would want it to go, and to go on that journey, which I think we're ultimately we're all on. So it's really reassuring to hear that from you.
Thank you.
We've got some questions, which is really exciting. So the first question from someone actually anonymous. So it's great to hear how you've changed your policies and practices, clearly making a big impact. What does the future look like? Is there anything else you are looking to do to further improve your inclusive recruitment policies and practices?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that's really important to us, actually. We don't sit and think, well, we've made it, well, that's it. Because I think for any kind of EDI, actually, it is an ever-changing environment. So one of the things that we're going to be working on next, actually, as the Orpheus Centre, is to make Orpheus colleagues, Orpheus employees great colleagues to disabled people, because I think more needs to be done for awareness of different disabilities, especially the ones that are not so obvious to people. So what we want to work on is, how do we make that environment just incredibly inclusive naturally, whether you see a disabled person in front of you or not, because you don't always. We have diversity champions, and we've got some disability champions, and we are going to work with them to create these this new project, or work with them on this new project. But we also get them to review, we update our policy, our recruitment policy every year, and we get them to review it so that they can let us know. We don't just rely on our own expertise and our knowledge, we get them to review it. Our students have an accessibility group, we get them to review those things. So I think the future for us is to continue to keep learning, really work on making people good colleagues to disabled people going forward.
Thank you, Jay. That's fascinating. Thank you. So we have a question here from Martin. Martin works in the Northern Ireland Civil Service. So he says, I have a dyslexia assessment that shows that I have a highly significant dyslexia difficulty, particularly impacting working memory. This has caused me to struggle with promotion interviews. Is there any advice you can give me how to make the interview or the promotion process more accessible for someone with working memory difficulties? Many thanks.
Well, I mean, probably this is better for you, is it, Deborah? You've got far more experience in this area.
I can give it a whirl and then we can have a chat. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a relatively common experience. We know that working memory, so that's, essentially short-term memory difficulties, are a kind of key experience, or a key underlying vulnerability with dyslexic people. I'm dyslexic myself. And of course, in any kind of scenario where you're kind of being asked to do something without any preparation, that can have a significant impact on your verbal working memory or your auditory working memory, depending on your profile. So in terms of like interviews, so I guess, so the question is, the question I have is the question asking how can you better prepare for interviews, or is it asking how can you create more of an inclusive process for other people with working memory difficulties? So I guess if you're that individual going for that, preparing for that interview, I would ask for adjustments. One of the adjustments that you can ask is for questions in advance. That means that you can prepare, so you're not putting that demand on your working memory. We know that stress has an impact on working memory, and of course interviews unfortunately tend to be quite stressful, and so that further sort of impacts working memory. So I would ask for questions in advance, but I would also, because you don't know that you're going to get them, so what I would do is sit down with a friend, a colleague, and actually anticipate what questions you think are going to come up. So that gets your brain thinking. So it's almost like you're already in the room. And then I would just have a go at brainstorming what kind of answers that, you might come up with. So basically just think about it that you're actually I was going to say it's like you're going into battle, but battle is a negative word, but you know, it's like you're going into battle, you know, potentially, you know, it's a really important, you want this job, it's important, so make sure that you give yourself the best possible chance by, you know, doing as much preparation as you can, and really thinking, mind mapping out, you know, what you think they might ask you. And then in terms of if you're, I guess, the recruiter and you're looking at how to make that process more accessible, similarly, obviously, as Jay said, you know, asking that individual what they would require. I know there is a question later about, you know, if you should offer questions in advance, which we'll talk about in a minute, but that might be something that you build into that recruitment process, and that you do offer questions in advance. I'd also suggest, again, depending on the role, that you consider what assessment method you're using. So, for example, is asking people questions representative of the role that they're going to end up doing, for example? Is the method of assessment, whether that's the application form or the interview itself or assessment method, is that kind of fit for purpose for what that person's going to end up actually doing, kind of thing. Yeah, so they're my initial thoughts based on that. Joe, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think it's I think my biggest advice probably to people with a disability is to if they can, to be really honest, because I think we would always make adjustments, and we really would. We'd always talk to people about what it is that we can put in place. And I've worked with people who have struggled for years without adjustments, and it's been hard, you know, like the person said in this, you know, not getting promotions, not getting interviews, not getting those things because they needed some adjustments in place. So I would say, if you can have a voice and really speak up about your needs, I hope most organisations would be able to support that. I mean, we've often given interview questions in advance. I think that's really reasonable.
I've had a bit more of a chance to read the question again. This is my working memory working. And yeah, so the focus of the question looks like more it's about how to make it accessible, you know, generally. I guess another thought I'd had was around, you know, providing candidates with kind of as much information, of course, as possible, but actually like running a Q&A session beforehand, or a webinar, so that they're really familiar with the kind of, I guess, assessment culture or the interview culture, what to expect, who they're going to see beforehand, the kind of structure, I guess, if it was an interview, all of that stuff. So I would maybe think about, as an organisation, what can you do before they get in the room for that interview or assessment to prime them as much as possible. And that would help, you know, with all of us as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martin. So someone has said, and this follows. So they said, we don't currently provide interview questions in advance. Would you recommend that every organisation should do this?
Well, do you know, I would myself personally, I would love to have interview questions in advance before interview, maybe because I find interviewing hideous myself. I kind of have like white coat syndrome when it comes to being interviewed. So I don't see why not. I think there are lots of organisations who have strict interview processes, but for me, as a head of HR and for my team, it's about getting the very best out of each candidate, whether they have a disability or not, and generally putting them in a stressful, you know, putting anybody in a stressful environment. You're not going to get the person who's best for the job. You're going to get the person who copes with that stress the best. I think interviews should always be transparent. Tell people what you're going to do in that interview. I would always give them the time they need as well. Time's really important. I think if people are feeling rushed, again, they can't remember what it is they need to say. Yeah, and yeah, but just give a nice process for people. It doesn't have to be hard. You're not always going to get the best out of people.
It's a really good question, and it is something that comes up a lot. And I think there's been some press about, oh, it might be John Lewis that said that they are giving interview questions in advance to everyone. I can't remember. It might not have been John Lewis, but someone quite high profile. And it's really interesting because I guess there's kind of two sides to that. The one side is that, yes, actually, if you're looking at kind of inclusive recruitment across the board, then actually, you know, everybody would benefit from having the questions in advance. So why wouldn't you, you know, do that, you know, in that way, so it doesn't actually in a way have to even be an adjustment, because you're just automatically prepared or given, you know, what you need. The other side of it, which is quite an interesting thought, is around, and again, it's about how the assessment method or the interview is fit for purpose for the job. So, for example, as a recruiter or a hiring manager, if an essential part of that role is that an individual needs to kind of respond verbally on the spot in quick time. I mean, that sounds horrendous to me, but you know, there are some jobs and some, you know, that do require that. Then there is potentially an argument that actually not giving people the interview questions is more, in that scenario, is kind of more fit for purpose, because actually if that's what essentially you're assessing, then that could be seen as a kind of appropriate form of assessment. But if the role does not involve any form of like recall, short-term recall, then there's no need for that, of course, to be measured or, you know, explored within the interview process. So anyway, I mean, there's, I think, two sides that I've heard. So I guess I'd ask you guys what you think, because it's up to, ultimately, you know, all organizations are different and your cultures are all different. So be interesting to hear what you guys think. But yeah, thank you for the question. Okay, so next question. So hi there, I'm a recruiter for a law firm, and a common issue we face, which I'm sure many other industries and employers do, is that people won't initially disclose a disability or health condition at applicant stage, but will disclose later on. What are some good ways of encouraging or empowering those with a disability to disclose at an earlier stage, other than making your commitment to inclusion clear in the job spec as mentioned?
Yeah, so obviously that is a clear one, is to be really clear at that initial stage. But I think you're absolutely right, people don't always disclose a bit later on. So we don't just ask our candidates who have made a disclosure what adjustments they need, we ask everybody. So when we get into the point where we're inviting to interview, we will then go back to them and say, do you need any adjustments for this interview process? So at every opportunity, we will ask that question to give people time to, you know, to let us know if that's what they need. Not just ask once, and if they don't tell us, never ask again. And again, once we've offered, we ask about adjustments. We ask at every stage. It's good to ask at offer stage, because you can support with things like an access to work application, which then as an organisation won't cost you anything if it's within that initial stage. So yeah, I think it's keep asking is my advice.
Yeah, I'd reiterate what Jay said. One thing which I'm pretty sure, Jay, you had said was around, so for example, you know, you might have as this person's mentioned, you know, like an inclusion statement. So it's kind of clear that there's a commitment, but a general kind of commitment. So just making sure that there's no barriers to that sharing or disclosure. So in that advert, I would create an email address that is very specifically, you know, adjustments@neurobox.co.uk, which basically says, if you need an adjustment, please email us, or with a dedicated telephone number or something, so that there's no kind of grey area about, should I do it? Where should I do it? You know, you're kind of giving people, you're just making it easier, really, rather than it just being a kind of, here's my inclusion statement, you go and detangle it and work out if we really mean it, or if we, you know, we're going to do anything about it. But actually you're saying, yeah, we are, here's the email address, let us know. As Jay said, it's just about, well, not just about it, but, you know, about asking in different ways at different stages with that. Jay, do you find that when you're having those initial conversations early on and people are calling you, do they either ask you or a member of your HR team about your experience, either of a personal disability or of other colleagues
Yeah, we have been asked that quite a lot. One of the things that our diversity champions do actually is support things. They will also support candidates in our recruitment process. So we tell people about them. All of our diversity champions have lived experience. So our disability champions have gone through our adjustments process, either at interview or during their employment. So we're really happy to direct them to people who have lived experience of our processes. So yeah.
Thanks, Jay. And I guess the other things are around, in terms of, yes, you've got potentially that inclusion statement, but what else is on your website to kind of showcase actually that you are deeply committed and this is what you're doing as well. So there's kind of many, I guess, visual clues, isn't it, to show where you are. Thank you. So the last question, well, actually, I think it might be the same person, because it's, oh yes, it is, I think. So as a follow-up to this, as in the question we just looked at, the individual says, I have ADHD myself and did the same thing. Even though the culture seemed great from looking at their website, the fear still held me back, which is understandable. Even though my employer has been very accommodating, and I'm not sure what would have made me disclose earlier. That's really interesting to have your personal perspective. That's a really good question that I wonder only you can answer. But Jay, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it highlights. I think a lot of disabled people feel exactly that. I think there's a lot of organisations who possibly do shout about being inclusive, but actually don't always have the knowledge on how to do that well. So I think it's a really difficult thing. I think that I think it's I think it's such a shame that so many disabled people are fearful for disclosing their disability, but I absolutely understand why. It's difficult. I would say, no, you have a right to these. This is not a, do you mind if I have? You have a right to these adjustments. If you have a disability, you have a right to reasonable adjustments within the workplace. So I hope that would make people feel more comfortable asking, knowing that that's not, you're not asking anything you shouldn't. You have a right, and the employers have a legal obligation to make adjustments for you. So please ask, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say something. I was sort of struck by the individual who said, I'm not sure what would have made me disclose earlier, which is really interesting. I guess, we all come to that job application form from different perspectives or different experiences, don't we? And chances are you've had you've had a bad experience at an employer or through a recruitment process at some point, and so we're kind of carrying that with us. So it's completely understandable why we don't want to be like, hi. So I think, remember that you don't need to disclose, I'm ADHD. You're just saying I require an adjustment, which in a way is less emotionally charged.
Yes.
You're not kind of opening yourself up to that kind of potentially that conversation, which you might not want to have. It's kind of personal, isn't it? But if you say, I'd like to have a conversation about adjustments that I need for the interview, it's much more kind of straight, black and white kind of thing. So yeah, there's some initial thoughts from that. Thank you so much for all your questions. We do have a few minutes if anyone wants to ask any more questions. I did have a question for you, Jay, based on your brilliant presentation. So I know one of the things you said, it was important to, really challenge line managers, hiring managers, to challenge hiring managers in that, in that stage where you're kind of putting together the job descriptions. And I guess, how would you go about getting, I guess, buy-in from a hiring manager who's not necessarily 100% on board?
Yeah, I think this is part of our journey, and it really has been. It started out challenging. I'm not going to lie. I think it's taken a lot of time. We've delivered a lot of training. We talk to all of our staff about being about our commitment to being disability confident. We've put a lot of work in over the years to like I say, embed that into our culture. It's been a journey of change. So we do have, I think we just talk to people. We have had hiring managers who are, they want to keep I want a fun person on my team kind of essential criteria. But I think it's when you explain these things to people, when you teach them, when you talk to them about the inclusive processes, it's very hard for somebody to say, no, I'm going to keep it on there if you explain how that's going to cause a barrier to somebody. So I think, I'm sorry, I don't feel I've been very helpful there in my
Oh, no.
process, but I think it is that it's a journey. I don't think people should go into this thinking, well, we'll just tick a box and say that we're going to support disabled people. This needs to become part, it's part of change and culture within your organisation.
Thank you, Jay. I'm sure that kind of, it sounds like the relationship between the hiring manager and the recruiter is quite key, isn't it? Because that's all of the early stage work.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
that is potentially the point that you might get a bit of friction, or that you need to do a bit more work with. So.
And we do actually. I mean, again, we're a small organisation, so our HR resource is not enormous, but what we do with that HR resource is build those really key relationships with hiring managers. So we are all working as a team on this, not disjointed.
Great, thank you, Jay. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for those questions. Jay, really thank you so much for such an engaging talk and your thoughts on the audience's questions. Really appreciate it. Before I move on, great. So just to let you know that, as I mentioned at the beginning of today's webinar, this was the first in a series of webinars coming up. So just to give you a brief overview of kind of what to expect from NeuroBox over the next couple of months, having more really interesting conversations. So in August, we've got my colleagues Donna and Mark, who are going to be talking about how to have a challenging conversation as a line manager. That's on the 21st of August. In September, I'm going to be looking at how to develop a neuro-inclusive policy. So that will kind of also link a little bit with what we've talked about today in terms of recruitment policies. Then in October, Donna and Mark are going to be talking about how to untangle a workplace needs assessments. So one of those assessments that you might get from a team member, a colleague, and you're not really quite sure what to do with it or how to untangle it. What does it mean? And November, Donna and I are going to be talking about how to encourage the conversation. So the kind of the conversation around, I guess, sharing or disclosure kind of thing. And lastly, in December, Donna is going to be talking about how to champion your employee resource groups with a guest speaker as well. So that's what's kind of coming up in this series. I really hope you'll join us. I believe that everyone who is attending today will receive invitations to those events. As I mentioned at the beginning, you'll also be receiving a recording and some top tips from Jay based on her experience at the Orpheus Centre. So that's it from me. Just to say again, thank you very much to Jay. Thanks everyone for coming. I hope that you still managed to get some of your lunch break today, and we really look forward to seeing you again in our next session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.